Welcome back to our discussion here at AV Veterans Talk with Mike, Dennis, and Gerry. One thing about the Stolen Valor aspect, after 9/11 in 2005, President Bush was part of a thing there to make sure and to pass legislation that said that if you were caught embellishing, a military record, or if you were a civilian that was out parading around as General Eisenhower or something like that, anyway, we need to kind of reel you in there. And there was actually some penalties that were involved with, a misdemeanor. Right. Except unless you were out parading around a Congressional Medal of Honor, which could actually put you in jail for a year, like that. But it kind of fell into this confrontation.
Well, it became a First Amendment conflict. It
Yes.
went to the Supreme Court, and the court ruled you can't really be sent to jail for lying.
That's right.
That's what it came to.
That's right.
You can't be sent to jail for lying. So the way that the Valor Act has been amended is if you gain from it, if you
Yes.
use the decoration claimed, the fraudulent claim, in order to gain. Now, we knew such a person.
Yes.
Who came into our town, who came into the Point Man meeting, and what were some of his claims, Gerry?
Oh, that he was a paratrooper, a sniper, a trainer of canines, and had just generally embellished.
And was intelligence work in Central America. He'd made very careful construct of his presentation, because he had been in the 101st Airborne Division, but he claimed jump wings that he was not entitled to. Steve Baker from Grace Resources handed out forms to all of us and said, please put down your awards and decorations so we can recognize you. And this guy ended up putting the Occupation in Japan medal on there that they stopped awarding in 1950 or something. And so there he was. But the point about this guy was he was soliciting money from the public.
Yes. Yep.
And he was making a living on this.
Yes, there you go. And that's where the tripwire was.
Right.
Stuff because, and we also think, of him trying to promote a business.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, off of that. And some
a phony nonprofit is an effort to take in money and not have to pay taxes.
Correct.
That's why it's done by the people who use that as a means of fraud.
Yes.
And to associate a military claim with that then makes it doubly fraudulent and I would say more than twice as dishonorable.
Yeah, absolutely. You had an individual, kind of a little different, that was claiming.
Right, yeah. Back in, I think it was around 1992, 93, we had a fellow, we had probably a good 15 guys that would show up at our Point Man meeting. And one guy was always dressed in either a jacket or some kind of military uniform. Never questioned because it was an honor system.
Sure.
And always had, I was got involved in discussions and everything. Several years later, the guy passed away, and had the funeral at our church. And George Palermo, who was a post leader for Point Man at that time, walked up to the family and said, "Do we have a flag? We're going to, coming to, drape the coffin and so forth." And one of the, I think it was a brother, says, "Well, for what?" He says, "Well, because he was in the military." He goes, "No, he wasn't in the military.
Oh, man,
his brother was," which
Yeah.
I think he was trying to catch up to that. But
Yeah.
no, he wasn't. And it, I think it broke the group down probably about, maybe lost about 60% of our members.
Wow.
Yeah, and it really hit us hard.
Yeah.
So it was, he even went to the moving wall down in El Segundo with us. He was always involved with us, but we had no idea that it was totally fraudulent. So.
A point that you raised about after 9/11, and right now one of the institutions in America, one of the few institutions in America that claims the admiration of most Americans is the military.
Correct.
But you know, when Gerry and Mike got home from Vietnam, people weren't pretending to be Vietnam veterans.
Right, they were
These guys were pretending to not be Vietnam veterans.
Curl your hair,
So
get
they
that Fu Manchu going
wouldn't
on,
have
you know?
people, you know,
Yeah.
doing bad things to them.
Yeah.
So the upshot is that 9/11, you know, burnished the credentials and all of those people who have served since. There's a group called Military Phonies, and the interesting thing about fraudulent veterans or stolen valor claims, why is everybody in SEAL Team 6?
Yeah.
If everybody who was wearing that SEAL trident on a baseball cap or something, SEAL Team 6 would have been the size of the 101st Airborne Division from then to now.
Yeah.
But they never say, well, I turned wrenches at George Air Base.
Yeah.
Or I was in Germany.
Right.
That's not what the claim is.
Right. So it's you know, amazing, and to think it's a generational thing. I can understand now, you know, more because the Vietnam veteran, like the individual you were talking about, there became all of a sudden the changing of mindset in society to where we really wronged these guys. You know, we're going to reach out and show an affection now. It was the you know, welcome home movement. And suddenly, you know, people on the outside say like, well, now I want to be a part of that. You know, maybe it was, like you said, a brother issue. You know, maybe he's taking the place of a brother to fill some kind of an emptiness inside of him because he didn't, or who knows, you know. So if you're the psychologist, you know, you probably had...
Well, I'm a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah, but I mean...
master's level clinician, so I don't have a doctorate, but I do understand...
You don't claim stolen therapists.
Yeah, that's right.
Stolen therapists, I like that. So,
yeah.
And Dennis and I have, even back to the World War II generation...
There was a heartbreaking case. Ken Kreese, who was the national president of the Pearl Harbor Survivor Association, and we lost him about 6 years ago, and Ken was simply the most earnest and honest man you would meet. And we had about 5 or 6 Pearl Harbor survivors in our valley, most of them now gone from us.
Yeah.
And there was one among them, and it was hard for Ken to track that down because the Pearl Harbor Association really did not have a database. It existed before those. But he went and did the Freedom of Information and found out that the guy who'd been coming to all their gatherings and giving testimony of where he was and what he did, where he was and what he did not add up to Ken. So he got the guy's Freedom of Information, and he found out that, sure, he served in the Navy, and he was in the far North Atlantic, and that was honorable service. But the guy had been telling his younger brother all of his life that that's where he was. So when it was time to do his funeral, it really was very painful because his brother had actually gone on to a very honorable and valorous tour of duty as a paratrooper in the Pacific.
Yeah.
But he had built his aspiration on his brother's unfounded claim. So it can be heartbreaking, but I think it's what clinicians call the imposter syndrome. And the imposter syndrome is I do need to be something other than I am.
Yeah.
So there's what's called an ego deficit, and it's a profound ego deficit.
Well, yeah, and how we all put that particular self out there. You know, there's our veteran self. There's also our clinician self, our Christian self, what have you. You know, that in different environments we can kind of morph into those things a little bit, where we're different with a particular crew that we're with than we are in another one. You know. Behave differently at dinner, those kinds of things. So when you take that to the extreme, where people actually move into different personalities, you know, that kind of thing, assume a role to make themselves more than what they really are, you know. But we can all dabble in that kind of persona thing, you know, our carriage, how we see ourselves, how we present, and then you have people that are embellishing that presentation.
Yeah, you seldom see a combat veteran being flamboyant or wanting to get his word out there.
Right.
They're always
the Rick
reserved.
Noltes
and,
of the world.
Yeah.
If you know Rick Nolte, he is the Navy corpsman. He was part of the band of guys from AV High School that went over to Vietnam, and he absolutely. We've actually interviewed him here on the show, and boy, he's in a shell when it comes to his guys, and his stories of crawling over that fence and pulling those guys back, and hearing the cries at night, and his loss of Mark Ferguson, which was one of his high school buddies, and the way he just, like I said, he could care less about the whole military service thing or being out in front of the public, so. He's the real deal, as there are obviously thousands more the real deal. So we need to take a break. I think I saw an indication that I'm running long here in the mouth. So anyway, we'll be right back here at AV Veterans Talk with our great interview people.
Trio.
Our trio, yes.
The three amigos.
The three amigos. Thank you for joining us for this installment of AV Veterans Talk here at Aerotech News.